Jai Gurudev for the Age of Enlightenment. His Holiness Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, founder of the Maharshi Technology of the Unified Field. Advanced lectures on the TM and TM City program. Lecture 5, the TM City program, the practical technology of Vedic science for immortality, culturing the ability to maintain both change and non-change on the level of the simplest form of awareness, to live immortality in the waves of change. Maharshi.
We are in the grip of immortality. It's like the grip of a nation that comes to the commander-in-chief when he has surrounded the nation with his army. He has not yet got into the nation, but he declares victory. Because now the nation cannot go out of its grip. Even though it's not fully within the grip, but then the circumventing, the going round the whole thing and keeping it lively there. Like that, invincibility is within our command, even though we have not stepped onto the territory, but we have surrounded it. It can't slip from our grip. That is from the abstract level of life, from the field of consciousness, which is the abstract field of life, which is the commanding field of life. Because what we have seen is that we are growing in the ability of performance from that field of all possibilities, from that field of frictionless flow. Faint impulse of consciousness produces what it aspires for. In producing this, we just don't consume energy. That key to trigger the source of power, so that the power manifests in the form we want it. That's what it means. At a point where the relative and the absolute meet, we create an impulse in consciousness, and it produces what it wants to produce. Activity or stillness. What the ability growing in this direction, of performance without consuming energy. This ability is the basic ground for immortality. Because mortality, as we know, must result from exertion. Whatever vitality one has exhausted it, and then that's the display of the mortal quality of life. Life is a field of all possibilities, and in that, on one side of the nature of life is mortality, on the other side of its nature is immortality. So mortality is displayed profusely in creation. Immortality also is profusely displayed in creation, And between the mortality and immortality, longevity is displayed, enormously displayed. Life of the galaxies, life of the earth, life of the sun, different ranges of existence, different range of in time. And then the universe as a whole, a continuum of change. Everything in the universe is changing, but the universe as a whole is a continuum. It's eternal, it's immortal. So already the phenomenon of immortality is very, very livable. It's already there. We see the universe going on. So the change exemplifying mortality, or mortality exemplifying change, and immortality exemplifying non-change, the whole human awareness is composed in this beautiful knowledge of all possibilities, mortality, immortality. Now from our experiments during Siddhis and the growth of our ability on that level of infinite correlation, frictionless flow, we know we can turn the key of energy and vitality by a faint impulse of consciousness. This is ordering the agency of nature. This is applying to the invincible government of the universe, the natural law, to favor us with what we want. A faint impulse of consciousness. Application of a sutra. One little sutra. This is applying to that all-powerful, invincible government. Applying to the Senate there, where the total potential of power is lively. Seat of natural law. Applying to that structure of pure knowledge, which is our self. Structure of pure knowledge, the seat of all organizing power. Putting up a note very gently, without consuming energy. The whole emphasis is on not exhausting our mechanics of performance, not exposing them to exertion. Our mechanics of performance, our intellect, our mind, our senses, not exposing them to exertion, and still getting the thing done. That means our ability, our growing ability to function from a level of life which will not consume life. On the other hand, which will revitalize life. Now, this growing in our consciousness, we see we are developing the technology, a new technology of performance, a new technology of action, where action, instead of consuming life, will revitalize life. Action to revitalize life. This is the skill of action that we are developing. We are growing in this skillful performance, where performance will not only not consume energy, but will provide energy. It will enliven that level which is non-decaying. This kind of performance will enliven that level of life which is non-decaying, which is eternal, immortal field of all possibilities. So in this we have surrounded immortality. We have surrounded immortality. Now, more than this, our desire is to get into the various parts which might be the constituents of immortality. Immortality as a whole has been captured. As a whole, we know all about it. We are in the mechanics of owning it for its details. We want to enter into the territory of immortality now. But we have captured immortality. What remains, we are not the tired seekers of immortality. We have it in our grip. Only we want to examine more thoroughly its constituents, its details. And one great constituent of it is this physiology. Physiology, which is phenomenal in the property or quality of change. Physiology, which is phenomenal in the character of change, that means character of mortality. We gripped immortality from that level of consciousness. From that level of consciousness. But that's a holistic grip. And now we want to grip very profoundly the constituents of that, the constituents. And the one big grand constituent of immortality is that which is the ground for that immortal state of consciousness. Physiology is the ground, is the net. The bird sits in the net, inside. Consciousness glorifies itself within the body. The indweller, consciousness, immortal in its nature, sits very safe and very alive within the net which is exposed all the time to mortality. Within the mortal frame sits the immortal. Now we want somehow that when the bird is so beautiful, why not its nest be glorified? We want to decorate the nest of the peacock. Very colorful, very beautiful, and it should have its most dignified dwelling. So we want the dwelling, the mortal dwelling, to rise to the level of immortality. Our aspiration in this direction comes from the possibility. It's possible. It's possible intellectually for us because the indweller is possible, is immortal. consciousness is immortal, and we have the experience of functioning in that immortality. This is one point of our aspiration. Another point of our aspiration is that the ancient record about mortality and immortality brings to us some beautiful memories, that there are some who have their place in the history, who are immortal. There are 7, 8 or 9 present in the Puranas. Hanuman and others. Saptaite Tirjivina. These 7 are said to be immortal. The names are beautiful. Ashwatthama. Ashwatha is the tree, huge, enormous, big field of all possibility. So what we have is the grip of immortality in the field of consciousness on a very practical level, supported by all theoretical evidences and also supported by the word of the ancient. The Vedic science expands before us the field of immortality in its totality. Now what we want is physiology, human physiology. We are exploring into the possibility of immortality in the field of change. Change. There is a phenomenon before us that in a circus they put fire on a ring, 2 sides of it, and circulate. As the speed grows, the ring becomes a ring of fire, continuous fire. No more changing values. So it's the same thing which, due to the velocity, is found to be non-continuous, and the same due to change velocity found to be continuous. It is a phenomenon in nature. With this we can imagine that the same element of change, if brought to such a close wave motion, so close together that even though inside it would be change, but it would be demonstrating non-change. Element is the same, phenomenon is the same, it's a matter of giving speed to it. Matter of giving speed to it. Now this in terms of speed, that the change could be made non-change. This change made non-change is so beautifully organized by nature in another setup. Other setup is human brain. Innumerable cells, as many as may be needed to make change non-change. It's always going on in the brain. The child doesn't know how much cells are dying and new coming up. But then he knows that he is now 5 years, now 10 years, now 20 years, now 100 years, now 1,000 years. The continues. He continues. The person continues with all the change going on in his physiological structure. Somehow the nature has organized such that change is no damage to continuum. Change is no damage to continuity. Mortality is no damage to immortality. Intellectually, the picture is very clear. The nature is in favor of mortality along with immortality. This is coexistence of the two, not one after the other, but coexistence of the two. Same thing is evident to us in the field of society or a race. So many people off and on, celebrations going on, but then the race continues and continues and civilizations continue and continue and continue and continue. And then the same thing, much on a bigger level. So many civilizations come and go, come and go. The world continues. So many galaxies up and down, but the universe continues and continues and continues. So we have in nature a display of coexistence of mortality and immortality. And therefore, if we are looking for a mortal to be immortal, we are only getting another side of him. And if we can see a man from in front, we can very well see him from behind. What is the harm in it and what is the difficulty in it? A man has two phases to it. One is the mortal phase, the other is the immortal phase. Now it's a matter of taking him up either on this phase or on the other phase. Take him to be mortal or take him to be immortal. Same thing, whether a man lives mortality alone and sacrifices immortality, or lives immortality either sacrificing mortality or without sacrificing it. Both the phases are the phases of his own value. Mortality, immortality, the junction of the two, the coexistence of the two. Mortality, immortality, immortality, immortality. So what we would prefer is the two together, because we have experienced so much of joy is there in the relative. Eyes see beautiful, beautiful things. Had we had not the eyes, then who would enjoy this beautiful flower? So much variety of joys, waves of joyfulness in variety, huge infinite variety in nature, and the bliss in the transcendent. If given a choice, we would go for both together. So in our unfoldment of knowledge about immortality, by taste, we would not sacrifice immortality. And it's not a matter of our choice. We cannot choose the other way. Nature is so profound in the coexistence, because the structure of pure knowledge is so profound in all possibilities, and that we have found to be our own consciousness, to be our own self. So when our own self is such a perfect mosaic of differences, so beautiful, so enjoyable, then in our quest for one, we would not go to sacrifice the other. What we want is a lively field of all possibilities, all the time, day and night, 24 hours and 12 months in a year, all the time, fullness of life. And fullness means this and that together. Anoraniyan, Mahatomahiyan, Upanishads describe this state in this phase. Minuter than the minute, bigger than the biggest. All possibilities in a field of nothingness, vacuum. all possibilities in emptiness, all possibilities in the unmanifest state. The entire manifest creation in the continuum of the unmanifest. So the situation in nature is just so complete that we cannot negate anything if we even want to. So in this picture what we see is life a field of all possibilities. Now because we are concerned with immortality very much, so we can now see immortality coexisting with mortality. And when it is so, then it's a matter of disallowing the exclusion of the other when we are in possession of the one. We have been educated so far to go deep into the parts, physics, chemistry, this, isolated values of natural law. Fine, we are not going to dismantle all that we know. What we are going to do is, from every area of our knowledge about natural law, we are going to enliven the structure of pure knowledge, the totality of it. The totality lost to view gives us waves of change, puts us in the constant waves of change. So we don't want to be lost in the parts. We certainly want to enjoy the parts, but not to the exclusion of the whole. And this art we have already developed quite a lot. When not losing the wholeness of our consciousness, we are capable of generating the impulses in isolation. Specific impulses. This is our TMCD program. The whole is secured. Conscious awareness is open to that infinite, transcendent unboundedness. And then we promote boundary. So what we are doing in this art of TMCD program, we are consciously bringing together the unboundedness and boundaries. And we are consciously becoming capable of performance on a level which is equally exposed to unboundedness and boundary, to infinity and finite, to immortality and mortal. Conscious function of a level of consciousness which is equally exposed to the area of immortality and mortality. This is our skill of performance in which we are growing as we are practicing Siddhi program. We are learning to be awake in an area which is equally disposed on one side to immortality, on the other to mortality at the same time. That our awareness is developing that ability which will have on a conscious, practical, active level the display of immortality and mortality. So in our behavior, in the field of experience, we are rising to be a living immortality in the field of change. It's a beautiful picture. It's a very beautiful picture. Through the CD program, which is such an automatic thing, which does not consume energy, and in that region, skillfully, we are growing in the ability to be consciously enjoying what immortality is when we are enjoying mortality as the waves of immortality. So the waves of change now carry the spirit of the waves of non-change. This is living wholeness of life. When the change becomes the waves of non-change, where the change expresses liveliness of non-change, in the way, the picture is so remarkably excellent that change, which we previously thought to be overshadowing the continuum, we used to say unity underlying the diversity, underlying diversity. Now through our city program we have come to an experience, and now we are understanding the nature of that experience, and what we find, the change which we thought was so cruel to the spirit of eternity, we found we were wrong. We find we were ignorant. Change is not a cloud to hide the sun of non-change. The change virtually means definitely, in this case, the change definitely is the value of non-change, the value of non-change. Only it's a lively value. The change is a lively value in as much as the waves of change. The change is expressed in the waves. So the waves are the waves of immortality. The waves are the waves of immortality. On that level of awareness, which has known to function at the junction point of the two controversial qualities of change and non-change. Change and non-change, two controversial values, and the awareness is now so skilled in its own value that it can enjoy simultaneously the value of non-change and the value of change. This is the TMCD program. Value of change and value of non-change. Patanjali is very clear about the nature of sanyama. He wants the sanyama on that level of consciousness which is stationed at the junction point of change and non-change. Junction point of change and non-change. Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi, these three values bring our awareness on a point where on one side it is aware of the change, on one side it is aware of the non-change, and it is aware of change and non-change simultaneously at the same time in its simplest state, without any contriving for it. Without any contriving for it. Without any contriving for it. This change and non-change at the same time, on that simplest form of awareness, does not require awareness to move from one to the other. The awareness doesn't have to get on to the relative level and then get on to the absolute level and relative level and absolute level, and it doesn't have to increase in the velocity of this in order to make it a continuum. Not that. In its simplest form, simultaneously it is comprehending both values in itself. So it's not a phenomenon of movement, it's a phenomenon of non-moving eternal continuum in the nature of consciousness itself, to have mortality and immortality, change and non-change simultaneously enjoyed, simultaneously lived. Beautiful vision of what we are doing to nature, what we are doing to ourselves in the practice of the Siddhi program. So this becomes a technique for enlivening and practically living on all levels of awareness. The total value of nature, which is composed in two values, change and non-change, mortal and immortal. And therefore, it's completely within the nature of the mortal to enjoy. I am trying to avoid the expression to begin to enjoy. It's not a matter of beginning to enjoy. It's a matter of enjoying. Because that situation is eternal situation. It's not that it will rise now and it will disappear tomorrow. The nature is always complete. Natural law is always complete. The total potentiality of natural law is available in every little aspect of natural law. Like the total value of the sap is available in every grain of its manifestation, be it green or yellow or round or flat or what. Whatever the quality in nature, whatever the quality in creation, it's embedded in the qualityless continuum of immortality. So whatever mortality, that means whatever little, a day or a month or a year or an age, howsoever small or long range of mortality, all these are embedded in immortality in a most natural way. Now, this is not just a flight of intellect for us, because we are practically experiencing that level of consciousness which is change and non-change at the same time. And change and non-change at the same time. And from within this state of consciousness, which we define as the simplest state of awareness, simplest state of consciousness, from within the simplest state of consciousness sprout the waves of immortality, which in the field of ignorance are known as the waves of mortality. They are the waves of immortality, the waves of immortality. So in this, the mortal phase of life then remains or becomes an event of ignorance brought about by the individual on himself. There is a huge amount of choice from mortal to immortal. And as the awareness enjoys the two phases being in its own nature, as the awareness enjoys that more and more, it enjoys immortality on the face of change. It enjoys change as the waves of mortality. Waves of immortality are needed for mortality to be lived consciously. Waves of immortality. Waves of immortality are needed for immortality to know itself in the same way as in the hot tub you lie not knowing that the water is hot. You have to move in order to feel the hot water. You have to move. You have to move so that the nature of water may be properly experienced. Same way, the state of immortality has to move in order to know its value. And this move of immortality is the waves of mortality. Up and down, the life is up and down, the life is up and down. But this up and down is just to feel that there is, that immortality is awake. For immortality to know itself in complete wakefulness and not lose sight of any aspect of it It's necessary that it moves. And when the immortality moves, it must move in time and space. It moves, it can move within itself because it's a field of all possibilities in its own right. But even so, when it's a field of all possibilities, then it can also move in this field of relativity. It moves. So the whole field of relative life is there in order that the absolute phase of life, the immortality, be known to itself in an enjoyable manner. Commenting upon this beautiful nature of eternal bliss in the state of immortality, Vyasa, the exponent of Vedanta, the exponent of Vedanta means the exponent of the structure of pure knowledge. When he defines the structure of pure knowledge, he says, he made a sutra, one of the Brahma Sutras, and he says, Anandamayo Abhyasat. 2 words. Anandamayo Abhyasat. Abhyasat means from practice. From practice. What happens to Brahman? What happens to that structure of pure knowledge? Anandamaya. He becomes blissful. The state of bliss becomes blissful. There is a difference between the two. Bliss and blissful. Bliss and blissful. Bliss is like saccharine, and blissful is like diluted value of it, which is sweet. Saccharine is so concentrated that it feels bitter. It tastes bitter. But then, in its diluted state, the transcendent, completely still, non-active immortality becomes a living reality by virtue of abhyasat, practice, by virtue of practice. And practice just makes that simplest form of awareness know itself more and more thoroughly, so that in its easy structure, it is a lively field of all possibilities. It experiences change as its own fluctuations. Its own fluctuations, not going out of its own qualities, but its own fluctuations expressing its own qualities. So it's living in infinity, it's living immortality in the field of change. Living immortality in the field of change. Living immortality in the field of change. So now when we are seen from this, whatever little experience we have in the field of consciousness, analyzing mortality and immortality, the absolute and the changing, the relative and the absolute, analyzing this area from the level of our own experience in the field of consciousness, we see that immortality is in our grip. We see mortality is not and does not have to be out of mortality. It can't. Mortality can't be taken to be out of immortality because it's not the situation in nature. It's not the situation in life. Only it's a matter of realizing that it is so, is rising to immortality. Immortal is always the nature of life. Only conscious awareness has to realize that the change is expressing the non-change, eternally and continuously. It's a matter of just realizing it. So immortality is a natural continuous phenomenon, only it has to be open to human awareness. And a very simple, practical, automatic, natural, effortless procedure for that is sidhi program. The sidhi program, which gives us the ability to accomplish anything by mere wishing. It's not fishing, it's mere. All the fishing done without going to the lake. Just remaining on the shore of our own lake within us. And it doesn't need any other means of alluring the fish. It's just within ourselves. The immortality floating within itself means living practical life from the state of simplest form of awareness. Living simplest form of awareness in daily life. Living simplest form of awareness in daily life means living the phases of mortality in terms of a continuum of immortality. So living immortality goes with the awakening of consciousness to its fullest extent. That means immortality goes with enlightenment. In this, we are not excluding the phenomenal phase of mortality. We have included all the phenomenal phase of mortality to be the natural and continuous waves of immortality. The waves of immortality, waves of immortality. It's just a matter of rising to this reality, taking the awareness to this reality. The change is phenomenal to express non-change. Mortal, that means changing phases of life, are just expressions of immortality. And this awakening is in terms of I am everything, I am everything. And this on the real, significant level of practical life, which involves physiology. Physiology is involved. So what we want is that when we are rising to this level of awakening, when we are rising to this level of awakening where every phase of mortal will become a continuum of the immortal, when we are rising to this, then we can stretch our performance in the field of body, physiology, so that the nest of a beautiful bird is not scratched out by the thorny edges of the sand in the wind around the nest. The environment of the physical life, environment of society, the world, the events, the circumstances, the situations all around the body, the physiology, they don't scratch the eternal continuum of immortality, which is manifest inside. The surface value of life is not scratched out, is not made ugly. So that the bird inside, when he comes out, enjoys all beauty around it. Consciousness, when it channels out through the 5 channels of perception and 5 of action, and mind and intellect, all experiential mechanics, that it flows out smoothly. All the senses are functioning in perfect accordance with their own latent powers, with their own potentialities. Nothing is scratchy or thorny or rough which would create friction for the flow of consciousness. Every aspect of the flow of consciousness in numberless directions should always remain frictionless. And for it to be so, the physiology of the system should cooperate with itself, so that the whole structure of all the senses and the thinking mind, the neurons in the brain and the recitative faculty in the brain, the intellect and the experiencing ability, the ego, all the nervous system, all aspects of nervous system in the whole physiology, anatomy of the body, it's all perfect, to express it in one word. The desirability of perfect functioning of all parts of human physiology is also a delightful area to enter into when we are considering immortality. Otherwise the knowledge will remain incomplete. Otherwise what will it be? As if there is no road to the castle and we take a helicopter and land on the castle. And the present trend of growing knowledge through different fields of science doesn't bypass the glory of the path. Doesn't want to. It wants the path to be intact. The whole path should be intact. And in the scientific understanding of immortality, we must have the understanding of the whole path through which the immortality becomes a living reality in daily life. And that is the path of all the senses and the area from where the mind and intellect work. This whole physiology must be in perfect attunement with natural law, so that the potential, the total potential of each sense is in complete functioning. The total potentiality of each sense of experience and each sense of perception and the faculty of thinking, deciding, the whole mechanics of human performance, which has the body as its mechanics, it must function most profoundly, so that it will be soothing to the skillful functioning of consciousness, where consciousness would be functioning on that level where mortality becomes the waves of immortality, which of course is growing through this CD program. But we want to have a very scientific understanding and approach to immortality, so that immortality becomes a living reality in such a reliable manner. We don't want to live immortality in dream. I'm immortal and I did this and I feel of all possibilities because I could jump onto that hill and dive down into the lake and anything. These will be dreams. We want immortality become a living reality of the waking state of consciousness, not dreaming state. That is why we are uncovering the science of immortality. We are designing the scientific approach to immortality, which requires all aspects which may be the concern of immortality should be accounted for, should be known thoroughly. So the science of immortality is being designed, is being promoted, is being brought to light by our systematic investigation, firstly, of all the features of mortality, and the complete knowledge of mortality will give us mortality as waves of immortality. So that is our approach. Our scientific approach to immortality goes through the thorough understanding of all the aspects of mortality. And when we have brought to our understanding the total range of mortality, then on both sides of it we will have the goal. The source of mortality is immortality. The goal of mortality is immortality. So mortality will just be the means of expression of immortality, means of expressing immortality. So we will scrutinize the whole area of change. And the whole area of change is this whole physiology of human existence, the body, all about the body, and then we will see what is there which does not cooperate to maintain consciousness on its top level of brilliance, so that it lives mortality in the waves of immortality. We will locate. While considering the whole body, we will see where is the clumsiness which restricts the full potential of consciousness to be lived. So all those clumsiness. And for that we will analyze what are the different values of physical structure. There may be brain or the lungs or the kidneys or what. These few prominent areas of change, all these prominent areas of change, and we'll design a prescription of immortality for the whole world. We want the whole population to just not waste its breath unnecessarily and unduly. So this knowledge of immortality in the ways of mortality, this knowledge and the promotion of those mechanics, the promotion of those values, those routines of the day, that dietary system, the whole thing. Because it's just a matter of how we eat, what we eat. It's a matter of how we eat. They say the thing may be poison in one state, it becomes non-poison in its transformed state, other state. All these pharmacies are always doing all these things. They make medicines out of poisons. So the transformation of the value is in the skill of uncovering the opposite value latent inside it. So when we are uncovering the knowledge of mortality, what we are doing is we are discovering the latent value in mortality, which is immortal. Immortality is latent in mortality. So by knowing thoroughly and completely mortality, we would naturally have a vision of immortality. And then what we will have is immortality is everywhere, mortality is just there to express it. Mortality is just there to express it. And then with this knowledge we will have such efficient functioning of all the parts of the body to go on and on functioning without consuming life. On and on and on and on and on. We have in Ayurveda very beautiful things. So we should listen about immortality from Dr. Dwivedi today. Because what we want is now get into the direct mechanics of immortality. One mechanics we are already using, practicing. Morning and evening flying, huge. We are making the consciousness burst through the body, making the body more and more transparent, like that, like that. And then we'll see if there is some little thing deposited here, and they will take out all those deposits, but in a very skillful way, so that they don't declare non-cooperation with mortality. Just dissolve there. Stresses dissolve very thoroughly. So we'll have designed some kind of way of life for the people, some kind of routine of the day, some dietary habits, some little tablet if something goes wrong, some little tablet for prevention, and all these little things will continue. And this will be out of our scientific study of immortality. We have been going on in this university for the last how many years on isolation here and there, and whatever we have found, we are able to see all the scientific experiments in one perspective. And we are encouraged to see that all of them give us a direction towards immortality. Retarding of aging, stabilizing the age on one point. So all our efforts of these 5-7 years are now going to blossom into fulfillment now in this year of pure knowledge.